On my 29th birthday, my father did not give me a card or a gift. Instead, he stood on a stage in front of 150 people and handed me an invoice for $527,000. That is the price tag he put on my existence. My mother ripped my graduation photos off the wall and threw them into a fire pit, while my sister live-streamed my humiliation to her 50,000 followers. They handed me a bill for every cent they wasted raising me and told me to pay up or get out. They thought they were breaking me. They thought I was just their failure of a daughter who worked a dead-end assistant job. What they did not know was that I had already bought the building they were standing in. Before I tell you how I turned their greed into my greatest weapon, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for your place in your own family. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The air in Buckhead always smells like old money and manicured azaleas, but that night it smelled like expensive perfume and judgment. I parked my 10-year-old sedan 3 blocks away from my parents' estate to avoid the valet judging me. Walking up the long driveway, I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses and the soft hum of a jazz quartet. My stomach twisted into a knot, not because I was nervous, but because I knew exactly what was waiting for me. This was supposed to be a birthday dinner. At least that is what the invitation said. But as I stepped through the massive double doors of the mansion, I knew immediately that I was not the guest of honor. I was the prop. The foyer was filled with people. Not family, not friends, but business partners from my father's megachurch and socialites my mother was trying to impress. I stood there in my simple beige dress and sensible flats, feeling like a stain on a white silk sheet. I took a deep breath and tried to blend into the shadows near the coat check, but I was not fast enough. Amara. My mother's voice cut through the jazz music like a serrated knife. Loretta stood at the top of the grand staircase looking like a queen in emerald velvet. She did not smile. She descended the stairs with a tightness in her jaw that only I recognized. She marched straight up to me, and before I could even say hello, she grabbed my arm. Her grip was iron masked by a soft touch for the onlookers. "What on earth are you wearing?" she hissed through her teeth while maintaining a fake smile for the passing guests. "I told you this was a black tie event, Amara. You look like you are here to serve the hors d'oeuvres, not attend the party." I tried to pull my arm away gently. "I came straight from work, Mom." The traffic on the connector was terrible. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my hair with disdain. I wore my hair natural, a thick halo of curls that I was proud of. But to Loretta, natural hair was an act of rebellion. It was unpolished, it was not elite. And that hair, she whispered, leaning in close, so only I could hear the venom. "I offered to pay for a silk press. I offered to buy you a decent wig. But you insist on walking around looking like a political statement. Do you know who is here tonight? The board of directors, the city council. And you show up looking like this. You are embarrassing us, Amara." Again. She reached up and aggressively tucked a curl behind my ear, her nails digging into my scalp. It was a microaggression I had felt 1,000 times since childhood. The message was clear. You are not enough. You will never be enough. Just then the crowd parted and a cheer went up. I looked toward the entrance and saw my sister Chloe. She was everything I was not. She was wearing a sparkling silver gown that probably cost more than my car. Her weave was long, straight, and expensive, cascading down her back like a waterfall. She walked in with her husband Hunter on her arm, and the room seemed to gravitate toward them. "Look at your sister," my mother said, her voice instantly changing from scorn to adoration. "Look at Chloe. That is what a daughter is supposed to look like. She respects herself. She respects this family. Why can you not be more like her just for one night?" Chloe spotted us and floated over, basking in the attention. She held up her phone, which was already recording. "Hey guys, look who finally decided to show up," she said to her camera audience, not even looking me in the eye. "It is the birthday girl, I guess. Happy birthday, sis." She turned the camera to me, zooming in on my simple dress and my hair. I could see the comments already rolling in on her screen. Laughing emojis, questions about why I looked so dusty compared to her. Hunter laughed a low, condescending chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Easy on her, babe," he said, patting my shoulder with a heavy hand. "Not everyone is cut out for the spotlight. Some people are just born to be in the background, right, Amara?" I stood there silent. I learned a long time ago that speaking up only gave them more ammunition. I looked around the room. 150 people. I recognized maybe 5 of them. There were no balloons for me. No photos of my childhood. The banner hanging above the fireplace did not say "Happy Birthday, Amara." It said, "The Wilson Family Legacy." That was the moment it clicked. This was never about me. My birthday was just an excuse. A convenient date on the calendar for my father to host a donor dinner and for my mother to show off her perfect life. I was just the contrast. The shadow needed to make Chloe shine brighter. The failure needed to make their success look even more impressive. "Go find a drink," my mother said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand as a photographer approached them. "And try to stay out of the official photos. We need these for the church newsletter, and I want the aesthetic to be cohesive." She turned her back on me instantly, wrapping her arm around Chloe and Hunter. The photographer snapped away, capturing the perfect trio. The successful pastor, the elegant wife, the golden daughter. I stood 3 feet away, completely invisible. I walked toward the bar, my heart pounding against my ribs. I could hear the whispers of the guests as I passed. "Is that the older daughter? I heard she works as a secretary somewhere." Such a shame when the rest of the family is so accomplished. I gripped my clutch so hard my knuckles turned white. They saw a woman who had failed. They saw a charity case allowed into the manor out of pity. They had no idea that the phone in my purse was buzzing with emails from a merger I had just closed that afternoon. A merger that would reshape the skyline of Atlanta. They had no idea that while they were sipping champagne paid for by church donations, I was managing a portfolio worth more than this entire neighborhood. But I kept walking. I kept my head down. Because I knew the night was just beginning. And I knew my father had a speech prepared. He loved speeches. He loved the sound of his own voice. But tonight, he had prepared something special. I could see him by the stage holding a folder. He looked excited. Manic, even. He tapped the microphone, and the feedback screeched through the room, silencing the chatter. Testing, testing, he boomed his voice, practicing the authority he used every Sunday in the pulpit. "Everyone, please gather round. We have a very special presentation tonight. A little accounting of history, if you will." My mother found me in the crowd and shot me a look that said, "Do not move." I froze. The air in the room shifted. This was not the warm fuzziness of a toast. This felt cold, calculated. I watched as my father hooked his laptop to the projector. A spreadsheet appeared on the massive screen behind him. Rows and columns of numbers, dates, expenses. The room went deadly silent. I saw my name at the top of the spreadsheet. Amara Wilson. Investment report. My blood ran cold. I thought they were just going to ignore me or insult my outfit. I did not know they had itemized my life. I did not know they were about to try and sell my dignity for a tax write-off. My father smiled a wide, predatory grin that did not reach his eyes. "Daughter, come up here," he beckoned. "Let us show these good people exactly what you are worth." I took a step forward. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was sharpening. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They wanted a show. They wanted to put a price on me. Fine, I would walk onto that stage. But I was not walking up there as their victim. I was walking up there as an auditor, and I was about to find every single discrepancy in their books. The spotlight hit me blinding and hot. I felt every eye in the room burning into my back as I ascended the 3 small steps to the platform where my father stood. He did not offer me a hand. Instead, he gestured to the screen behind us, like a showman unveiling a new car. A collective gasp rippled through the room as the projector beamed a high-definition spreadsheet onto the wall. The numbers were large, bold, and red. At the bottom right corner, circled in thick lines, was the grand total: $527,450.12. I stared at the number. It was so specific, so calculated. My father Desmond adjusted his microphone and the feedback whine made a few guests wince. He looked out at the crowd of 150 people, his face glowing with a mix of pride and malice. He was in his element. To him, this was not cruelty. This was a sermon. Brothers and sisters. He began, his voice booming with that familiar preacher cadence. We often talk about stewardship. We talk about investing the talents God gave us. But what do you do when an investment yields no return? What do you do when you pour capital into a venture for 29 years and the balance sheet still comes up red? He picked up a laser pointer. The red dot danced across the screen, landing on a row labeled 1998. Look at this line item here. Orthodontics, $6,000. We paid top dollar to fix her teeth, hoping a winning smile would help her marry well, help her secure a future. But look at her now. She barely smiles. That is $6,000 down the drain. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room. My sister Chloe, who was sitting in the front row, giggled loudly, encouraging him. My father fed off that energy. He moved the laser pointer down. Private tutoring, $4,000. Piano lessons, $8,000. We tried to give her culture. We tried to give her refinement. But you cannot polish a stone and expect it to become a diamond, can you? All that money spent just for her to end up fetching coffee for middle managers. It is a tragedy, really. A fiscal tragedy. I stood there, statue still. My hands were clasped in front of me. A younger version of me would have crumbled. I would have cried and begged him to stop. I would have run off the stage in shame. But the Amara standing there tonight was not a scared little girl. I was a senior risk assessor for Atlas Capital. I dealt with hostile takeovers and corporate raiders every single day. As I looked at that spreadsheet, I did not see a debt. I saw something else entirely. I saw evidence. My mind began to race, not with panic, but with analysis. He had listed groceries. He had estimated the cost of the food I ate as a toddler. He had listed the gas money for driving me to school. He had listed the cost of my clothes. He had monetized his own fatherhood, and in doing so, he had just admitted to the IRS that he viewed raising a child as a business transaction. My father turned to face me, the laser pointer now aiming at my chest like a sniper scope. You see, Amara, this family is a brand. The Wilson name means excellence. It means success. Your sister Chloe understands that. Your brother-in-law Hunter understands that. But you are a liability. You are a bad debt that we have carried on our books for too long. Then came the moment that made the air leave the room completely. My mother Loretta stepped onto the stage. She was holding something in her hands. It was a silver picture frame. I recognized it immediately. It was my college graduation photo. It was the only photo of me displayed anywhere in the house, and it had been tucked away in a dark corner of the library. In the photo, I was wearing my cap and gown, smiling genuinely, holding my degree. It was the one moment in my life I thought they might be proud of. Loretta walked over to the portable gas fireplace that had been set up as a prop for the stage design. The flames flickered blue and orange behind glass. She looked at the photo, then looked at the crowd. We are entering a new season, she announced, her voice smooth and cold. A season of shedding dead weight. We are clearing the clutter to make room for blessings. And sometimes you have to burn the past to secure the future. Without a second of hesitation, she tossed the silver frame into the fire pit. There was a loud crack as the glass shattered in the heat. The photo curled and blackened. My smile in the picture melted away into ash. The room went silent. Even the sycophants stopped laughing. This was visceral. This was violent. It was a public erasure of my existence in this family. My mother dusted her hands off as if she had just taken out the trash. She walked over to my father and stood by his side, the picture of a supportive wife. My father turned back to me, his eyes hard and unyielding. So here is the deal, Amara. This invoice is your bill. $527,000. That is what you owe us for the burden of your existence. You can start a payment plan. You can take out a loan. I do not care how you do it. But until this debt is settled, you are no longer welcome at our table. You are no longer a Wilson. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and slapped it against my chest. I instinctively grabbed it. It was a printed copy of the invoice. "Pay up or get out," he sneered. The silence stretched on for what felt like an hour. I looked down at the paper in my hand. Then I looked at the burning remains of my photo. Then I looked at the crowd. I saw pity in some eyes. I saw mockery in others. But mostly I saw relief. They were relieved it was me up there and not them. I did not scream. I did not throw the paper back in his face. I simply took out my phone. My father frowned, confused by my action. "What are you doing putting it on your little payment app?" he mocked. I did not answer. I held the phone up and snapped a high-resolution photo of the invoice in my hand, capturing my father's signature at the bottom. Then I turned slightly and snapped a photo of the screen behind us, ensuring the breakdown of expenses was legible. Finally, I took a video of the fire pit where my graduation photo was still smoldering. "You have absolutely no shame, do you?" my mother hissed, realizing I was not breaking down as planned. I looked her dead in the eye. My face was a mask of absolute calm. "I have the invoice," I said. My voice was quiet but steady. "Is there anything else?" My father looked disappointed. He wanted tears. He wanted a scene. He wanted me on my knees begging for forgiveness for being a disappointment. My lack of emotion was robbing him of his climax. "Get out of my sight," he growled, waving his hand dismissively. "And do not come back until you have a check." I turned around. As I walked down the steps, I could feel the adrenaline vibrating in my fingertips. They thought they had just ended me. They thought they had stripped me of my value. But as I walked through the parting crowd, clutching that invoice like a winning lottery ticket, I knew the truth. They had just handed me the most powerful weapon I could have ever asked for. They wanted to talk about accounting. They wanted to talk about debts and liabilities. Fine. I would give them a lesson in forensic accounting they would never forget. The party was just getting started, but the celebration was already over. I was still processing the weight of the invoice in my hand when the next blow landed. It did not come from my parents this time, but from the man who had married into our family and decided that his ring gave him the right to police my existence. Hunter reached across the table and snatched my car keys right off the linen tablecloth. The sound of the metal hitting his palm was sharp and final. He held the key fob up to the light, dangling it like a prize he had won at a carnival. It was the key to my SUV. The car I had paid for. The car I drove to work every single day. "You won't be needing these anymore, Amara," he said, his voice loud enough to carry to the back of the room. "My father and I had a little chat this morning. Since you are so deep in debt to this family, we decided it was only fair to liquidate some of your assets. He signed the title over to me about an hour ago. Consider it a down payment on that $500,000 you owe." He tossed the keys to a valet standing nearby who caught them with a nervous look. "Take it around back," Hunter ordered. "My wife needs a new run-around car for her shopping trips." He turned back to me, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Besides, Amara, look at the bright side. Taking the bus is much more economical for someone in your tax bracket. You might actually save enough money to buy yourself a decent dress for once." The crowd chuckled. It was a low, cruel sound. They were enjoying this. To them, this was justice. The prodigal daughter being stripped of her unearned luxuries. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me, but I forced it down. I locked it away in the same cold storage where I kept my tears. Grand Theft Auto, I thought to myself. He just admitted to Grand Theft Auto in front of 150 witnesses. But the humiliation was not over. Just as I was about to turn away, a man stepped out from the shadows near the bar. A man I knew better than my own father. It was Mr. Sterling, the CEO of the mid-sized accounting firm where I had been working for the last 2 years. Or rather, the firm where I had been undercover. Mr. Sterling was a heavy-set man with a penchant for expensive scotch and cutting corners. He walked onto the stage, shaking my father's hand before turning to face me. "I am afraid the bad news does not stop there. Amara," he announced, his voice dripping with false regret. "Your father called me earlier this week. He was concerned about your ethics. And after conducting my own internal review, I have to agree with him." He pulled a white envelope from his jacket pocket. "You are fired, effective immediately." The room gasped. This was the final nail in the coffin. Losing my family was one thing. Losing my livelihood was another. "We found irregularities in your filing." Sterling lied smoothly. "Signs of gross incompetence. And frankly suspicion of embezzlement. We cannot have someone like that on our payroll. Consider this your official notice. Security will be waiting to escort you if you try to enter the building on Monday." He threw the envelope at my feet. It landed next to the spot where my graduation photo had been burned. I stood there stripped of everything: my car, my job, my family, my reputation. They had taken it all in the span of 10 minutes. My mother looked at me with triumph. My father looked at me with disdain. Chloe was still filming, zooming in on my face, waiting for the breakdown, waiting for the scream, waiting for the beg. But I did not beg. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone again. My hand was steady as a rock. First, I snapped a photo of Hunter standing there empty-handed after tossing my keys. Then I swiped to the voice recorder app. I had set it to record the moment I walked into the room. It was still running. It had caught everything. Hunter's confession to taking my car. Sterling's accusation of embezzlement without proof. My father's extortion attempt. I tapped the stop button and saved the file. The little beep of the phone saving the data was the only sound in the room. Then I looked up. I looked past my father, past my mother, past Hunter and Sterling. I looked straight into the lens of Chloe's smartphone. I looked at the little red dot indicating she was live. I looked at the 50,000 strangers watching this dismantling of a human being. I stared directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall of their reality show. "Message received," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. It was the tone of a judge delivering a verdict. "I accept these terms." I did not wait for a response. I did not ask for a ride. I did not say goodbye. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. The sound of my flats against the marble floor echoed through the silent hall. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea, not out of respect, but out of confusion. They did not understand why I wasn't crying. They did not understand why I wasn't fighting back. I walked past the valet who was holding my keys. I did not try to take them back. Let Hunter drive the car. Let him add a felony to his record. It would only make the lawsuit sweeter. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out into the humid Atlanta night. The air tasted like freedom. I walked past the line of luxury cars, past the security guards giving me pitying looks, and made my way to the service elevator in the parking garage. I pressed the button for the ground floor. As the metal doors began to slide shut, I saw my family one last time through the narrowing gap. They were toasting. My father was raising a glass of champagne. Chloe was laughing. They thought they had won. They thought they had cut off the dead limb. As the doors clicked shut, sealing me inside the metal box, the mask finally dropped. I let out a breath I had been holding for 29 years. And then slowly, terrifyingly, I began to smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a cold, sharp expression. The kind of smile a shark gives before it breaches the water. They wanted an accounting. They wanted to talk about numbers and debts. I pulled my phone out and dialed a number I had on speed dial. It rang once. "Yes, Ms. Wilson," a crisp voice answered. "It is time," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "Release the audit, freeze the assets, and call the IRS. I want the investigation to start tonight." I leaned back against the cool metal wall of the elevator as it descended. I was no longer Amara, the disappointed daughter. I was Amara the executioner, and I had a lot of work to do. While my family was popping bottles of champagne to celebrate cutting off the dead weight, I was stepping into a private elevator that required a biometric retina scan to access the 45th floor. Down at the mansion in Buckhead, my father was likely regaling his guests with stories of his tough love parenting, telling anyone who would listen that he had finally put his foot down. They probably imagined me sobbing in a motel room or sleeping in the back seat of a rental car. They pictured me counting quarters for a vending machine dinner. The thought of my misery was the garnish on their celebration. But 20 miles away in the heart of Midtown Atlanta, I walked into a living room that was larger than the entire ground floor of my parents' house. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a glittering ocean of lights that I had conquered years ago. I kicked off my flats and walked across the imported Italian marble floor. I did not turn on the lights. I did not need to. The glow of the city was enough. I walked straight to my home office. It was not a corner desk in a bedroom. It was a command center. 4 curved monitors hummed to life as I touched the trackpad. The screen did not show a resume for a desperate job hunter. It showed the live global markets. It showed the portfolio of Atlas Capital, the private equity firm where I was not an assistant, but the youngest managing partner in the firm's history. A soft knock came at the door. "Enter," I said, my voice dropping the submissive tone I had used for years around my mother. Julian, my personal assistant, walked in. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, holding a tablet and a double espresso. Julian was a man who had graduated top of his class from Harvard Law, yet he worked for me because he knew exactly where the real power in Atlanta resided. "Good evening, Ms. Wilson," Julian said, setting the espresso down on a coaster. "I trust the birthday dinner was memorable." "It was certainly eventful," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "Did you get the files I sent over from the car?" Julian nodded, tapping his tablet. "I have already forwarded the audio recording to the legal team. They are transcribing Mr. Sterling's termination speech as we speak. And I have the forensic team running a background check on the vehicle title transfer. It appears the notary stamp your father used belongs to a woman who died 3 years ago." I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing on my lips. They were sloppy. They were so arrogant, so used to getting away with everything because of the church's reputation, that they did not even bother to cover their tracks. "Good," I said. "Draft the complaint. But do not file it yet. I want them to sweat for a few days. I want them to think they got away with it." Just then, my personal cell phone began to vibrate on the mahogany desk. It danced across the surface, buzzing angrily. I looked at the screen. "Mom." It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. "Mom." Julian glanced at the phone, then at me. "That is the 67th time she has called in the last 4 hours, he noted. "Should I block the number, ma'am?" "No," I said, picking up the phone but not answering it. "Let it ring. Every missed call is a data point. Every voicemail she leaves is admissible evidence of harassment. She is digging her own grave, Julian. Let us not take the shovel out of her hands." I watched the screen light up again. I could imagine her on the other end. She was probably drunk on wine and adrenaline, furious that I had not called to beg for forgiveness. She wanted me to crawl back. She wanted to hear me cry so she could graciously offer me a repayment plan with high interest. She wanted control. I swiped the screen, sending the call to voicemail. "Is the merger with the tech group still on schedule?" I asked, switching gears instantly. "Yes," Julian replied. "The board is ready to sign on Monday. They are just waiting for your final risk assessment." I looked at the monitors. Millions of dollars were moving at my command. Companies rose and fell based on my analysis, and yet my family thought I was too incompetent to afford a silk press. The irony was delicious. "I want you to add something to my schedule for next week," I told Julian. "Contact the bank that holds the mortgage on the church, and get me the contact information for the trustee of my grandmother's estate." Julian's eyes widened slightly. He knew what that meant. He knew I was not just going to defend myself, I was going to dismantle their entire infrastructure. "Consider it done," he said. He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Happy birthday, Amara." "Thank you, Julian." When the door clicked shut, I turned back to the window. My reflection stared back at me against the backdrop of the city. I did not look like the girl in the beige dress anymore. I looked like a predator. My father had given me an invoice for $527,000. He thought it was a debt. But as I looked at the skyscrapers of Atlanta, knowing I owned a piece of that skyline, I realized he was wrong. It was not a debt. It was a down payment. And I was about to collect the interest. The 4 days of silence were not a retreat. They were the calm before the storm. And when the storm finally hit them, they would not even have an umbrella. I turned back to my screens. The work was just beginning. I had an empire to run and a family to ruin. My father thought he was being clever when he printed out that invoice. He thought he was using the language of business to humiliate me. But in his arrogance, he forgot the most basic rule of accounting. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot claim a child as a dependent on your tax returns for 18 years, enjoying every deduction and credit the government offers, and then turn around and claim that the money spent on food and shelter was actually a business loan. By handing me a bill for $527,000, he had legally reclassified his parental duties as a commercial transaction. And since he had never declared this so-called loan to the IRS, he had just handed me written confession of tax fraud. I sat in my office staring at the digital scan of the invoice on my monitor. My legal team had already drafted the whistleblower complaint. It was beautiful in its simplicity. We were not suing him yet. We were simply reporting a discrepancy. I attached the photo of the invoice. I attached the video of him on stage declaring the specific amount. And then I attached a copy of his tax returns from the last decade, which as the executor of my grandmother's trust, I had legal access to. He had claimed me as a dependent until I was 24, citing that he provided more than half of my support. That deduction saved him thousands. But now with this invoice, he was stating that support was actually a loan expecting repayment. That meant the deductions were fraudulent. It meant the interest he was implicitly charging was unreported income. And since the money used to raise me came from his salary as a pastor of a tax-exempt church, he was effectively commingling charitable funds with personal lending. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I did not hesitate. I did not feel a pang of guilt. I thought about the fire pit. I thought about my graduation photo turning to ash. I clicked send. The email went straight to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. 72 hours later, the atmosphere at the Wilson estate was very different. My mother Loretta and my father Desmond were sitting on the back veranda enjoying the afternoon sun. They were drinking Earl Grey tea from fine china and discussing the success of their little stunt. "I bet she is sleeping in her car right now," my mother said delicately, placing her teacup on the saucer. "I have not seen her online in days. Chloe says she has gone completely dark." My father chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "She needed a reality check, Loretta. We did the right thing. Tough love is biblical. Once she realizes she has nothing, she will come crawling back. And when she does, we will set up a payment plan. Maybe we can garnish her wages if she ever finds another job." They laughed. They actually laughed. They were so comfortable in their bubble of power that they did not hear the black government sedans pulling up the long driveway. They did not notice anything was wrong until the maid Maria stepped onto the veranda, looking pale and terrified. "Sir," she stammered, wringing her hands. "There are people at the door. They say they are federal agents." My father frowned, setting his newspaper down. Federal agents. Probably just a donation inquiry or a security detail for the senator. Show them in, Maria. But Maria did not have to show them in. 3 agents in dark suits stepped onto the veranda. They did not look like donors. They did not look friendly. The lead agent, a woman with sharp eyes and a badge clipped to her belt, walked straight up to the table. "Desmond Wilson?" she asked. My father stood up, buttoning his jacket, trying to summon his pulpit authority. "I am Pastor Wilson. To whom do I owe the pleasure of this visit? I am Special Agent Miller with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the woman said. She did not offer a handshake. Instead, she handed him a thick stack of documents. We are serving you with a notice of audit. Effective immediately, all your personal assets and the assets of the Wilson Family Trust have been frozen pending a federal investigation into tax evasion and wire fraud. My mother dropped her teacup. It shattered on the stone patio, the sound echoing like a gunshot. This is ridiculous. My father sputtered, his face turning a deep shade of red. I am a pillar of this community. My finances are impeccable. Who authorized this harassment? Agent Miller looked at him calmly. We received credible evidence regarding unreported income and the misclassification of funds, specifically a commercial invoice for $527,000 issued to an Amara Wilson. My father's face went from red to white in a split second. He looked at the agents, then he looked at my mother. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The invoice, the prop he had used to shame me, the weapon he thought was so clever, it had just boomeranged back to cut his throat. You cannot use that, he stammered. That was just a family matter. It was a lesson. The IRS does not deal in lessons, Pastor Wilson, Agent Miller replied. We deal in documentation. You created a financial document claiming a debt. We are simply following the paper trail you started. Now, if you will excuse us, our team needs to secure your home office. Do not touch any computers or shred any documents. That would be obstruction of justice. My mother stood up trembling. You cannot go in there. We have a dinner party tonight. You cannot freeze our accounts. How are we supposed to pay the caterers? Your accounts are already frozen, Mrs. Wilson, the agent said. I suggest you cancel the party. As the agents walked past them into the house, my parents stood frozen on the veranda. The tea was still steaming on the table. The sun was still shining, but their world had just tilted on its axis. My father slumped back into his chair, clutching the audit notice. His hands were shaking. She did this, he whispered. Amara did this. My mother looked at him, her eyes wide with a fear she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she was not in control. She reached for her phone to call their lawyer, but the call failed. Service suspended due to non-payment, the automated voice said. The freeze was already in effect. Miles away in my penthouse, I watched the notification pop up on my screen. The asset freeze was confirmed. The first domino had fallen. I took a sip of water and went back to work. I did not need to see their faces to know the panic that was setting in. I knew exactly what was happening. The house of cards was collapsing and the wind was just picking up. They wanted me to pay a bill. Well, I just sent them the receipt. While my parents were staring down the barrel of a federal tax audit, Hunter was busy living out his fantasy of being a wealthy man of leisure. He drove my black SUV through the wrought iron gates of the exclusive Rolling Hills Country Club, honking at the guard, who he usually ignored. Hunter had always felt like he belonged in these circles. He wore the right polo shirts. He smoked the right cigars. He laughed at the right jokes. But deep down he knew he was a fraud. He was living on his wife's allowance and his father-in-law's charity. But today was different. Today he had a car. He parked the SUV right in front of the clubhouse next to a row of Porsches and Mercedes. He stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses, making sure the valet saw him. Keep it close, kid, he told the valet, tossing him a $5 bill. I might need to leave early. He walked toward the first tee where his golf partners were waiting. There was Brent, a real estate developer, and Chad, a hedge fund manager. These were the men Hunter desperately wanted to impress. The men who actually made money while Hunter just pretended to manage assets. New ride, Hunter, Brent asked, eyeing the SUV. I thought you were a sedan guy. Hunter laughed, a loud practice sound that was meant to project confidence. Just picked it up, he lied, leaning on his driver. My sister-in-law was underwater on it. Poor girl could not keep up with the maintenance. So I did the family a favor and took it off her hands. You know how it is. Sometimes you have to bail out the less fortunate branches of the family tree. Chad nodded sympathetically. That is generous of you, Hunter. Family can be such a burden. They teed off. Hunter sliced his drive into the rough, but he did not care. He felt invincible. He had humiliated Amara. He had a new car. And he was sure that with Amara out of the picture, the family money would flow even more freely to him and Chloe. He was already mentally spending the inheritance. They were on the fourth hole, a beautiful par 5, lined with ancient oak trees, when the illusion shattered. The sound of sirens cut through the quiet afternoon air. Usually sirens were background noise in Atlanta, but these were getting louder. And they were getting closer. Hunter ignored them, lining up his second shot. Probably a medical emergency at the clubhouse, he said dismissively. Some old-timer probably had too much gin and a heat stroke. But the sirens did not stop at the clubhouse. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees. Tires screeched on the cart path. 2 police cruisers tore across the manicured fairway, ignoring the pristine grass, leaving deep, muddy tracks in their wake. "What the hell?" Brent shouted, jumping back as a cruiser skidded to a halt 10 yards away from them. Hunter stood there holding his 7-iron, confused. He looked at the police cars, then he looked at his friends. "Must be a misunderstanding," he muttered. "Maybe they are looking for a trespasser." A police officer stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was a large man with sunglasses and a hand resting on his holster. He did not look like he was looking for a trespasser. He looked directly at Hunter. "Hunter Davis," the officer shouted over the engine noise. Hunter forced a smile and took a step forward, dropping his club. "That is me, officer. Is there a problem?" "Do you know who my father-in-law is?" "I do not care who your father-in-law is," the officer barked, closing the distance. "Step away from the golf cart and keep your hands where I can see them." Hunter laughed nervously, looking at Chad and Brent for support. His friends, however, had taken several steps back, distancing themselves from the blast radius. "This is ridiculous," Hunter said, his voice pitching up an octave. "I am a member here. You cannot just drive onto the fairway like this." "We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Davis," the officer said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Grand theft auto, possession of stolen property, and driving a vehicle reported as involved in a felony." "Theft," Hunter spluttered. He turned pale. "You mean the SUV? That is not theft. That was a gift. My father-in-law gave it to me. I have the papers." He reached for his back pocket, but the officer drew his taser. "Do not reach," the officer yelled. "Turn around. Hands behind your back. Now." Hunter froze. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. He slowly turned around, his face burning with humiliation. He could see the other golfers on nearby holes stopping to watch. He could see the clubhouse balcony lined with spectators. "It is a mistake," he whined as the cold metal cuffs clicked onto his wrists. "My wife's sister, Amara, she is crazy. She is just jealous. Her father signed the title over to me." The officer spun him around and marched him toward the cruiser. "We checked the title, Mr. Davis. The vehicle is registered solely to Amara Wilson, and unless Amara Wilson was the one who signed that paper, you are holding a forged document. Taking a car without the owner's consent is theft." "But she was there." Hunter pleaded, his dignity completely gone. "She saw me take the keys. She did not say anything." "Silence is not consent," the officer said, shoving him into the back seat. "And forgery is a felony." As the door slammed shut, Hunter pressed his face against the glass. He saw Brent and Chad shaking their heads, picking up their golf bags and walking away. They would not be visiting him in jail. They would not be calling his lawyer. He was social poison now. Inside the cruiser, the air conditioning was blasting, but Hunter was sweating profusely. He looked at the partitions separating him from the officers. He thought about the dinner party. He thought about how good it felt to snatch those keys from the table. He thought about how he had mocked Amara for taking the bus. And then he realized something terrifying. Amara knew. She knew the moment he took those keys that he was walking into a trap. She did not stop him because she wanted him to do it. She wanted him to drive that car. She wanted him to feel safe. She let him drive it for 4 days, just so she could have him arrested in front of the very people he tried so hard to impress. "Amara!" he screamed, hitting the glass with his shoulder. "Amara, you witch! You set me up!" The officer in the front seat just turned up the radio, drowning out his screams. As the cruiser pulled away, tearing up more of the expensive grass, Hunter realized his life as he knew it was over. He was not the golden son-in-law anymore. He was a thief. And he was about to find out that in the state of Georgia, grand theft auto carried a sentence that no amount of prayer or family connections could fix. The golf game was over. The real game had just begun, and he was losing badly. The fluorescents inside the booking area of the Atlanta precinct hummed with a low headache-inducing buzz. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, but to my mother, Loretta, it smelled like an insult. She stood at the front desk, clutching her Chanel bag like a shield, demanding to speak to the manager as if she were returning a defective blender at a department store. My father, Desmond, paced behind her, muttering about political connections and how he played golf with the mayor. They were furious not because Hunter had committed a crime, but because they had been inconvenienced. They were still living in a world where the Wilson name was a get-out-of-jail-free card. My sister Chloe was sitting on a plastic bench crying. But she wasn't crying for her husband, who was currently being fingerprinted. She was crying because she had to sit on a plastic bench. She was frantically deleting photos from her Instagram, trying to scrub the evidence of the stolen SUV before her followers realized her life was a lie. "Where is she?" my mother shrieked at the desk sergeant, who looked like he had not slept in 3 days. "Where is Amara? I know she is behind this. She is the one who filed the false report. When I get my hands on her, I will make sure she never works in this town again." The sergeant did not even look up from his paperwork. "Take a seat, ma'am," he said in a tone that suggested he had dealt with far scarier people than a suburban pastor's wife. Then the automatic glass doors at the entrance slid open. The humidity of the Atlanta night rushed in, followed by a silence that swept through the waiting room. It started with the car. Through the glass facade, everyone could see the vehicle that had just pulled up to the curb. It was not a police cruiser. It was not a taxi. It was a Mercedes Maybach, black on black, shining under the streetlights like a dark jewel. The tint was so dark you could not see inside. My father stopped pacing. He knew cars. He knew that car cost more than the church parsonage. A driver in a uniform stepped out and opened the rear door. A large man in a tailored suit stepped out first, scanning the perimeter. This was Marcus, my head of security. He looked at the precinct entrance, gave a nod, and then held the door open. I stepped out. For 29 years, my family had only seen me in beige cardigans and sensible flats. They saw the Amara who shopped at discount racks, the Amara who tried to disappear. The woman who walked into the precinct that night was a stranger to them. I was wearing a bespoke cream-colored power suit that was cut to perfection. My hair was no longer pulled back in a messy bun, but styled in glorious, voluminous curls that framed my face. I wore oversized designer sunglasses even though it was night because I could. And on my feet were red-bottomed heels that clicked against the linoleum floor with the rhythm of a war drum. My mother actually gasped. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. She did not recognize me at first. She thought I was a celebrity or a high-profile attorney. But then I took off the sunglasses. "Amara," she whispered, the name getting stuck in her throat. The shock on their faces was visceral. It was as if they were looking at a ghost. A very wealthy ghost. My father's jaw went slack. Chloe looked up from her phone, her eyes widening as she took in the details of my outfit. She knew fashion. She knew the bag I was carrying was a limited edition Birkin. She knew the watch on my wrist cost more than her husband's annual salary. The jealousy that flashed across her face was so potent I could almost taste it. I did not look at them. I did not acknowledge their presence. I walked straight toward the intake desk, my heels echoing in the silent room. Marcus walked a step behind me, a silent, imposing shadow. "Amara." My mother finally found her voice. The shock was replaced by her instinctual need to dominate me. "How dare you show your face here? Look at you. Who are you trying to impress with this costume? You think renting a car and a suit makes you someone. You are nothing. You are a thief who put your brother-in-law in a cage. She lunged toward me, her hand raised as if to grab my arm the way she had at the party. She wanted to shake me. She wanted to physically reduce me back to the scared little girl she controlled. But she never touched me. Marcus stepped in front of me with the speed of a cobra. He did not shove her. He simply occupied the space where she wanted to be, creating a wall of muscle and expensive fabric. "Step back, ma'am," Marcus said. His voice was low, calm, and absolutely terrifying. My mother froze. She looked up at Marcus, then at me. "Amara, tell your hireling to move," she demanded, though her voice trembled. "Tell him who I am. I am your mother." I stopped. I turned my head slowly and looked at her. I did not see a mother. I saw a woman who had burned my photos. A woman who had stood by while I was humiliated. "I do not know this woman," I said to Marcus. My voice was cool, detached. It was the voice I used when rejecting a bad investment proposal. "Keep her away from me." My mother's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple and gray. "You do not know me," she screeched. "I gave birth to you. I made you." I turned back to the desk sergeant. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. I reached into my bag and pulled out a gold-embossed business card. "I believe Chief Henderson is expecting me," I said. The sergeant's eyes widened as he looked at the card. He picked up his phone immediately. "Yes, sir. Ms. Wilson is here." "Yes, sir. Right away." He hung up and buzzed the heavy security door that separated the lobby from the inner sanctum of the precinct. "Go right on back, Ms. Wilson. The chief is in his office." I walked toward the door. My father finally snapped out of his trance. He rushed forward, trying to leverage the situation. "Amara, wait. If you are seeing the chief, tell him this is a misunderstanding. Tell him Hunter is a good boy. We can fix this. We can work out the money." I paused with my hand on the door. I looked at my father. He looked small. Without his pulpit, without his stage, without his audience, he was just a desperate man in a wrinkled suit. "There is nothing to fix, Desmond," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. "The system is working exactly as it should." I pushed the door open. My parents tried to follow me, trying to slip through the crack of opportunity. "Hey," the sergeant shouted, standing up. "You folks stay back. That area is authorized personnel only. Sit down or I will have you removed." I heard the door click shut behind me. The sound severed the connection between their world and mine. Through the wire-reinforced glass, I could see them. My mother was arguing with Marcus, who was immovable. My father was slumped against the wall, looking defeated. Chloe was staring at me through the glass, her expression a mix of hatred and awe. I walked down the hallway. Officers nodded at me as I passed. They knew who I was. Not because of my father, the pastor, but because my firm managed the pension fund for the city's police force. I was not a suspect. I was not a witness. I was a power player. Chief Henderson was waiting at his door. He was a stern man who did not suffer fools, but he greeted me with a warm handshake. "Ms. Wilson," he said, ushering me in. "I am sorry it had to come to this, but your forensic team provided us with everything we needed. The evidence against Mr. Davis is irrefutable." "Thank you, Chief," I said, taking a seat in the leather chair opposite his desk. "And my family. They are causing a scene in the lobby." He waved a hand dismissively. "We are used to noise, Ms. Wilson. Do not worry. They will not be allowed back here. But Mr. Davis has been asking for you. He claims this is all a prank. He says you gave him the car." I leaned back, crossing my legs. "I bet he does. But we both know that title transfer was notarized by a dead woman. And I have the logs from my security system showing he took the keys without permission." The chief nodded, opening a file on his desk. "We do. He is looking at 5 to 10 years, Ms. Wilson, plus the fraud charges. It is going to be a long night for him." I looked at the monitor on the chief's wall, which showed a live feed of the holding cells. I saw Hunter. He was sitting on a metal cot, his head in his hands. His polo shirt was stained with sweat. He looked nothing like the arrogant man who had dangled my keys in front of a party. He looked broken. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I waited for the guilt. I checked for it like checking a pulse, but there was nothing. No guilt, no sadness. Just the cool, clean feeling of balance sheet correcting itself. "Can I see him?" I asked. The chief raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? He is pretty agitated." "I am sure," I said, standing up. "I think he needs to see that I am not the one in the cage anymore." As I walked toward the holding area, flanked by an officer, I adjusted my jacket. I was about to face the man who had mocked me for taking the bus while driving the car I paid for. I was about to show him that while he was playing checkers, I had been playing three-dimensional chess. The reunion was over. The lesson was about to begin. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and desperation, but to Arthur Sterling it must have smelled like an inconvenience. I watched through the one-way mirror as he paced back and forth, checking his gold watch every 30 seconds. He was a man used to country clubs and boardrooms, not cinder-block walls and bolted-down metal tables. He had likely convinced himself that he was here as a witness. In his mind, he was the respectable CEO who had dutifully reported a disgruntled employee. He had no idea that the disgruntled employee was currently standing on the other side of the glass, holding the detonator to his entire life. Chief Henderson stood beside me, arms crossed. "He has been asking for his lawyer," the chief murmured. "But he also keeps asking for water. He is sweating, Ms. Wilson. He knows the walls are closing in." I adjusted the cuff of my bespoke blazer. "Let us not keep him waiting, Chief. I have a company to liquidate." I opened the heavy steel door and stepped inside. Sterling spun around, ready to bark at a junior officer. When he saw me, his face contorted into a sneer of disbelief. "Amara," he scoffed, letting out a sharp breath of annoyance. "What in God's name are you doing here?" I told the officers I wanted to speak to the person in charge, not the secretary I fired for incompetence. "You really have some nerve showing up here after the stunt you pulled at the party." I did not say a word. I simply pulled out the metal chair opposite him and sat down. The screech of the chair legs against the concrete floor was the only sound in the room. I placed a thick leather-bound folder on the table between us. I rested my hands on top of it and looked him dead in the eye. "Sit down, Arthur," I said. My voice was not loud, it was not emotional. It was the flat effect of a coroner pronouncing a time of death. He bristled at the use of his first name. "Excuse me," he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "You do not address me like that. I am the CEO of Sterling Solutions. You are a nobody who is about to be indicted for embezzlement. Now get out of my way so I can talk to the detectives." He turned to the door, expecting the police to come rushing in to remove me, but nobody came. The door remained shut. The silence stretched out thick and suffocating. Slowly, the realization began to dawn on him. He looked at the mirror. He looked at the camera in the corner. Then he looked back at me. "Why are they letting you stay in here?" he asked, his voice losing some of its bluster. "Because, Arthur," I replied, opening the folder, "I am not here as your former employee. I am here as the forensic auditor who has spent the last 2 years inside your company tracking every single cent you stole." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a bank transfer record. Sterling picked it up, his hands trembling slightly. "What is this?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "That is a wire transfer for $50,000 from my father's church building fund to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Horizon Ventures," I explained. "And here is the corresponding transfer from Horizon Ventures into your personal offshore account, minus a 10% laundering fee." Sterling's face went pale. He dropped the paper as if it were burning his fingers. "You hacked my accounts," he hissed. "This is illegal. This is inadmissible." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I did not hack anything, Arthur. I have had access to these accounts since day one. You see, when you hired me, you thought you were getting a desperate girl who needed a paycheck. You put me in accounting thinking I was too stupid to notice the patterns. But you forgot one thing. You forgot to check who actually owns the building you rent. You forgot to check who sits on the board of the bank you use. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. You laundered money for my father. You took donations meant for orphans and soup kitchens, and you washed it through fake consulting fees. You helped him evade taxes, and in return, he helped you secure contracts with the city council. It was a perfect ecosystem of corruption. Until you decided to make me the scapegoat. Sterling slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. You are lying. I fired you because you were stealing. I have the termination letter right here. I fired you, he screamed, desperate to regain control of the narrative. I am the boss. You are nothing. I stood up slowly, towering over him, as he sat slumped in the metal chair. You think you fired me? I asked quietly. Arthur, let me clarify the corporate structure for you. Sterling Solutions is a subsidiary of a holding company called Aurelius Group. Aurelius Group was acquired 18 months ago by a private equity firm. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. That firm is Atlas Capital. Sterling's eyes widened. He knew Atlas Capital. Everyone in finance knew Atlas Capital. They were the sharks that ate the whales. I am the managing partner at Atlas Capital, I said, delivering the blow with surgical precision. I own 60% of your company, Arthur. I have owned it for over a year. I bought it specifically because I suspected you were helping my father hide assets. I just needed to be on the inside to prove it. I watched as his soul seemed to leave his body. The arrogance evaporated, leaving only a terrified old man. You own the company, he whispered. I picked up the folder and tapped it against the table, aligning the papers. So no, Arthur, you did not fire me. In fact, you have never been my boss. I have been yours. And as of this morning, I have executed an emergency board resolution. I leaned down close to his ear so he could hear every syllable. I am dissolving Sterling Solutions. The company no longer exists. Your assets are being liquidated to pay back the charities you stole from. Your golden parachute has been set on fire. And since you used company resources to commit a federal crime, your corporate veil has been pierced. That means the feds are coming for your house, your boat, and that little villa in Tuscany you thought was so secret. Sterling slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. A low moan escaped his lips. Please, Amara, he begged, his voice muffled. I have a family. I have grandchildren. Your father made me do it. He said it was God's money. God has nothing to do with this, I said, straightening up and smoothing out my suit jacket. And neither do I. Not anymore. I turned to the mirror and nodded. The door opened immediately. 2 federal agents stepped in, cuffs ready. Arthur Sterling, you are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and racketeering, one of the agents announced, pulling Sterling to his feet. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him out. His eyes were pleading, but I felt nothing. He had stood on that stage and called me incompetent. He had tried to destroy my reputation to save his own skin. As they hauled him into the hallway, I heard him sobbing. It was a pathetic sound. I walked out of the interrogation room and met Chief Henderson in the hallway. That was efficient, the chief said, shaking his head in disbelief. You just dismantled a 20-year criminal enterprise in 10 minutes. I looked at the empty interrogation room. They thought I was an investment liability chief. I just wanted to show them what a real liquidation looks like. I checked my watch. The night was young. Hunter was in a cell. Sterling was in cuffs. My parents were at home with frozen bank accounts. But there was one loose end left. One person who was still out there thinking she could spin this into a social media sob story. My sister Chloe. I turned to Marcus, my security chief. Get the car, Marcus. We have one more stop to make. Where to, Miss Wilson? Marcus asked. My penthouse, I said. My sister has been living her best life on my credit. It is time she learned what happens when the bill comes due. While Arthur Sterling was trading his tailored suit for a prisoner jumpsuit, my sister Chloe was busy doing what she did best. She was playing the victim to an audience of strangers. I sat in the back of my car watching her live stream on my tablet. She had set up a ring light in the lobby of the police station. Her makeup was artfully smeared to look like she had been crying for hours, but I knew my sister. I knew she had checked her reflection 10 times before hitting the record button. She was sobbing into the camera, telling her 50,000 followers that her jealous older sister had framed her husband and destroyed her family. She was good. I had to give her that. She had the tears, she had the trembling lip, she had the perfect angle that made her look small and defenseless. "Guys, I do not know what to do," she whispered, wiping a dry eye. "My sister Amara has always hated me because I am happy. She is using some corrupt connections to attack Hunter. We need money for a lawyer. Please, if you can donate to the link in my bio, anything helps. We are fighting for justice against a tyrant." The comments were flooding in. People were sending heart emojis. They were calling me a monster. They were donating money. My sister was monetizing her own husband's arrest. It was grotesque, but it was also the perfect trap. I looked at Julian, who was sitting next to me with his laptop open. "Is it ready?" I asked. Julian nodded. "The forensic accounting on her personal spending is complete. We cross-referenced the dates of the withdrawals from the church charity fund with her social media posts. It is a perfect match." "Do it," I said. "Post it everywhere. Tag her sponsors. Tag the brands she claims to represent. Let the world see what the golden child really spends her money on." Julian hit enter. On the screen, I watched the chaos unfold in real time. One moment, Chloe was crying about justice. The next moment, the comment section stopped moving. Then it exploded. But this time, there were no heart emojis. "Wait a minute," one comment read. "Is this true? Did you buy a Birkin bag with money meant for the soup kitchen?" Chloe frowned, leaning closer to the screen, confusion flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I am not reading hate comments, guys, only positive vibes." But she could not delete them fast enough. My team had released a side-by-side comparison. On the left were the bank transfers from the Children's Hope Fund: $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. On the right were Chloe's Instagram posts from the exact same days: a new Chanel flap bag, a weekend trip to Cabo, a pair of diamond earrings. The caption my team wrote was simple: "Chloe Wilson asks for donations for legal fees. Here is where your last donation went." I watched the color drain from Chloe's face as she realized what was happening. Her phone started blowing up with notifications, but they were not donations. They were cancellations. A major fashion brand she had been working with for months dropped a comment that was pinned to the top of the chat. "Due to recent revelations regarding the misappropriation of charitable funds, we are terminating our partnership with Chloe Wilson, effective immediately. We do not condone theft." Then another brand followed. Then a skincare company. Within 3 minutes, Chloe lost every single sponsorship she had spent 5 years building. Her income stream evaporated instantly. "I did not do that," she screamed at the phone, forgetting her act. "That is fake. Amara photoshopped that. Stop saying I am a thief. I deserve nice things. I am an influencer. It is my job to look good." She was spiraling. She was admitting it without realizing it. She truly believed she was entitled to steal money from orphans because she needed to look rich on the internet. Just then, the heavy security doors behind her buzzed open. Hunter stepped out. He looked like a man who had been through a war. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair was a mess. He had spent hours in a holding cell, and he had clearly been crying. He had made bail, but he looked broken. Chloe spun around, seeing him. She saw a lifeline. She saw a prop to help her get sympathy back. "Hunter," she cried, rushing toward him, with the phone still recording. "Baby, tell them. Tell them Amara is lying. Tell them we are the victims." But Hunter did not hug her. He pushed her away. He looked at the phone, then he looked at her. He had seen the news while he was being processed. The officers had made sure to show him the evidence against his wife. "Get that camera out of my face," Hunter snarled. His voice was not the smooth, arrogant tone he used at the country club. It was raw and ugly. Chloe froze. "Baby, what is wrong? We need to stick together." "Stick together?" Hunter laughed, a manic, desperate sound. "I just found out you spent $200,000 of stolen money on purses, Chloe." "Stolen money? Do you know what the cops told me? They told me the dowry your father promised me. The investment capital for my real estate business. It does not exist." Chloe stepped back, lowering the phone, but the live stream was still running. The entire world was watching the Wilson power couple crumble. "It is tied up in assets," Chloe stammered. "Daddy said. Daddy is broke." Hunter screamed, his face turning purple. "Your daddy is a fraud, and you are a fraud. You told me you had a trust fund. You told me you were rich. I married you because I thought you could fund my lifestyle. I thought you were my ticket to the big leagues." The silence that followed was deafening. Hunter had just admitted out loud what everyone suspected. He was a gold digger. He did not love her. He loved the illusion of wealth she projected. You only married me for money," Chloe whispered, tears finally real this time. Hunter looked at her with pure disgust. "Look at you. You are nothing without your daddy's credit card. You are just a broke girl with a shopping addiction. And now you are going to prison. Well, guess what, honey? I am not going down with you. I am cutting a deal. I am telling them everything I know about the money laundering." "You wouldn't," Chloe gasped. "Watch me," Hunter spat. He turned to walk away, but Chloe grabbed his arm. Her nails dug into his shirt. "You are my husband. You are supposed to protect me." Hunter spun around and shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to send her stumbling back in her high heels. She fell onto the dirty floor of the police station lobby. Her phone clattered across the tiles, landing face up, still broadcasting her humiliation to the world. Hunter stormed out the automatic doors, leaving her there. Chloe sat on the floor, surrounded by her destroyed reputation. She looked at the phone. The comments were ruthless. They were laughing at her. They were mocking her marriage. They were celebrating her downfall. She reached for the phone, her hand shaking violently, and finally ended the stream. I sat in the car watching the screen go black. I felt a cold sense of satisfaction. Chloe had spent her entire life judging me for being single. She had mocked me for not having a man. She had built her entire identity on being the desirable, adored wife. And in the span of 5 minutes, I had forced her to see the truth. Her husband was a parasite. Her career was a scam. And her golden life was nothing but fool's gold. "Drive," I told the chauffeur. "The show is over." As the car pulled away, I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. My family was in ruins. My father was facing tax evasion charges. My mother was destitute. Hunter was turning state's witness, and Chloe was a social pariah. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more piece of business to attend to. The house, the symbol of their pride, the place where they had burned my photo. It was time to return to the scene of the crime, not as a guest, but as the landlord. An eviction day was coming early this year. The drive back to the Buckhead estate must have felt like the longest journey of my parents' lives. My father, Desmond, sat behind the wheel of his secondary sedan since the luxury SUVs had been seized by the IRS. My mother, Loretta, stared out the passenger window, watching the familiar streets of their exclusive neighborhood pass by. They were exhausted. They had spent hours dealing with federal agents and lawyers. They had watched their son-in-law get handcuffed. They had seen their daughter's reputation implode online. All they wanted was to get home. They wanted to lock the heavy oak doors, pour a stiff drink, and pretend that the world was not burning down around them. They wanted the safety of the mansion that defined their status, the house that told the world they were chosen. But as they turned onto the long, winding driveway, the headlights caught something that made my father slam on the brakes. It was not a welcome mat. It was a bright orange sticker plastered right across the seam of the double front doors. And standing on the front porch was not the butler or the maid. It was Julian, my lead attorney, flanked by two uniformed sheriff's deputies. My parents scrambled out of the car. My mother almost tripped in her haste. "What is this?" my father bellowed, his voice cracking with fatigue and rage. "Get away from my house! Who gave you permission to be on my property? I will call the police." Julian stepped forward, calmly adjusting his glasses. He held a clipboard in his hand. "The police are already here, Mr. Wilson," Julian said, gesturing to the deputies. "And this is not your property. Not anymore." My mother rushed up the steps, tearing at the orange sticker with her manicured nails. "Do not be ridiculous," she screamed. "We have lived here for 30 years. My mother built this house. It has been in the family for generations. You cannot just take it." "You are right, Mrs. Wilson," Julian replied. "Your mother Eleanor did build this house, and she was a very wise woman. She knew exactly who her daughter was, and she knew exactly who her granddaughter was." Julian opened the file on his clipboard. "When Eleanor passed away 10 years ago, she did not leave this house to you. She placed it into an irrevocable living trust. She named you and Desmond as the tenants with a lifetime right of occupancy. But she named Amara as the sole trustee and ultimate beneficiary." My father stopped dead in his tracks. "So what?" he spat. "We have a right of occupancy. That means we live here until we die. You cannot kick us out just because Amara is throwing a tantrum." Julian smiled. It was the sharp professional smile of a man who knows he has already won the case. "That brings us to the morality clause in the trust agreement," Julian said. Section 4, paragraph 2. "The tenants may occupy the residence solely on the condition that they maintain a harmonious and supportive family environment. Any act of public disownment, psychological abuse, or malicious destruction of family bonds constitutes a material breach of the trust." My mother froze. Her hand dropped from the door handle. "Harmonious environment," she whispered. "That is subjective. You cannot prove we broke a subjective rule." Julian tapped his tablet and turned the screen toward them. It was playing a video, but it was not a legal deposition. It was the live stream from my birthday party. The video showed my father standing on stage handing me the invoice. It showed my mother throwing my graduation photo into the fire. It showed the crowd laughing. It showed the systematic dehumanization of the trustee. "This video was broadcast to 50,000 people," Julian explained. "It is irrefutable evidence of public disownment. By declaring Amara was no longer a Wilson and demanding she leave the family, you legally triggered the eviction clause. You stated she was not family. Therefore, you are no longer protecting the family harmony required to live under this roof." My father stared at the screen. He was watching his own arrogance destroy his life. He had wanted that moment to be viral. He had wanted everyone to see how tough he was. Now that same footage was the key that locked him out of his home. "This is a mistake," he stammered, his bluster completely gone. "We were just... It was just a performance. We did not mean it." "The trust does not understand sarcasm, Mr. Wilson," Julian said, closing the file. "The eviction notice is effective immediately. Since you have breached the fiduciary duty to the family unit, your right of occupancy is revoked. The title reverts fully to the trustee, Amara Wilson." My mother collapsed onto the stone steps. She looked at the massive columns of the house. This house was her identity. It was where she hosted her charity galas. It was where she looked down on the neighbors. Without this address, she was nobody. "Where are we supposed to go?" she wailed, tears streaming down her face. "All our money is frozen. Our cars are gone. You cannot throw us on the street." Julian checked his watch. "You have 30 minutes to collect personal essentials, clothes, toiletries, and medication. No furniture, no art, no electronics. Anything purchased with family funds remains the property of the trust. The deputies will escort you inside to ensure you do not damage the assets." He signaled to the deputies, who stepped forward, unlocking the door, not with a key, but with a bolt cutter, snapping the padlock my father had installed just weeks ago. The sound of the metal snapping was final. I watched all of this from the security feed on my laptop in the penthouse. I saw my parents walking into their own home like criminals. I saw them frantically shoving clothes into garbage bags because they could not find their suitcases. I saw my father try to take his collection of vintage watches, only to have a deputy stop him saying those were listed as investment assets. It was a brutal dismantling of a lifestyle, but it was fair. My grandmother Eleanor had loved me when no one else did. She had seen how my parents treated me even back then. She had whispered to me once that she would always protect me. I never knew what she meant until I read the trust documents after law school. She had built a trap door under my parents' feet and handed me the lever. She knew that one day they would push me too far. I watched them walk out of the house 30 minutes later. My mother was dragging a black trash bag full of designer dresses that she would have nowhere to wear. My father was holding a box of heart medication and a Bible. They stood on the driveway as the deputies locked the doors and placed a new seal on the frame. Julian walked over to them one last time. "Ms. Wilson has arranged for a motel room for you for 2 nights," he said, handing them a slip of paper. "After that, you are on your own. She suggests you look for employment. I hear the local grocery store is hiring baggers. It is honest work." My father crumpled the paper in his fist, but he took it. He had no choice. They climbed back into their old sedan. As they drove away down the dark driveway, leaving the mansion behind, I took a sip of my tea. I remembered the nights I had cried in that house. I remembered hiding in my room while they threw parties I wasn't invited to. I remembered feeling like a guest in my own home. Now the tables had turned completely. The house was finally quiet. The toxicity had been scrubbed out. They had tried to bill me for my childhood. They had tried to charge me for the roof over my head, so I did the only logical thing. I took the roof back, and as I closed the laptop, I knew that for the first time in 30 years, that house in Buckhead was finally clean. News travels faster than light in the tight-knit circles of Black elite Atlanta, especially when that news involves money. The moment the story broke that I was not a broke executive assistant, but a managing partner at a global private equity firm, the vibration of my phone changed. For years, my phone had been silent. Now it was buzzing so constantly that I had to hand it over to my security team just to get any work done. Suddenly I had cousins I had not seen since kindergarten reaching out to remind me of how close we used to be. I had aunts who had ignored me at Christmas for a decade sending me Bible verses about the importance of family unity. My inbox was flooded with business proposals and requests for loans and tearful apologies that were clearly copy and pasted from the internet. They did not love me. They loved my net worth. They smelled blood in the water, but they were too blinded by greed to realize that I was the shark. I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. I decided to give them access. I instructed Julian to rent out the grand ballroom at the St. Regis Hotel. It was neutral ground, but it dripped with the kind of opulence my family worshipped. I sent out 150 heavy cardstock invitations. The wording was specific and calculated. It invited them to a night of reconciliation and redistribution. I knew exactly how they would interpret that word. Redistribution. To them it meant I was going to share the wealth. It meant I was going to be the dutiful daughter who bought everyone a new car to prove I was a good person. They took the bait hook, line, and sinker. On the night of the event, the ballroom was packed. They all showed up. Every single person who had been at my birthday party was there. They were wearing their finest clothes. The air was thick with expensive cologne and the desperate energy of people who thought they were about to win the lottery. I watched them from the balcony before making my entrance. I saw my Uncle Marcus, who had called me a waste of space, laughing loudly and telling people he always knew I was a genius. I saw my cousin Tiffany, who had made fun of my natural hair, telling a waiter that she was my favorite relative. They were eating the expensive hors d'oeuvres and drinking the top-shelf champagne and congratulating themselves on forgiving me. They truly believed that they were doing me a favor by showing up to take my money. I walked onto the stage and the room went silent. I was not wearing a gown this time. I was wearing a sharp white tuxedo suit. I looked like a CEO presiding over a shareholder meeting. I did not smile. I did not wave. I walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. "I see a lot of familiar faces here. I see the same faces that were at my parents' house just 2 weeks ago." A ripple of nervous applause went through the room. They were nodding, eager to please. "I brought you here tonight because I wanted to address the elephant in the room," I continued. "For years I have been the subject of your pity and your judgment. You thought I was poor, you thought I was a failure, and because of that you treated me like a ghost in my own family. But now you know the truth. You know that I have the resources to change lives." Uncle Marcus yelled out amen from the back of the room. A few people laughed. They were getting excited. They could practically feel the checks in their hands. I looked down at the podium where I had a remote control. "But before we discuss the future, I think it is important that we review the past. I think we need to remember exactly why we are standing here tonight." I pressed the button. The massive screen behind me descended. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The guests turned their heads, expecting a heartwarming slideshow of family photos. Maybe a montage of me growing up set to gospel music. Instead, the speakers blasted a sound that made them all jump. It was the sound of my father's voice booming over a microphone. "You are a bad investment, Amara." The screen lit up with the high-definition footage from my birthday party. It was the video from Chloe's live stream. I had not edited it. I played it raw. The room watched in uncomfortable silence as my father handed me the invoice. They watched my mother throw my photo into the fire. But then the video cut to the crowd. It zoomed in on their faces. I had my tech team isolate the audio and video of the guests. There was Uncle Marcus laughing and slapping his knee as Hunter took my car keys. There was Cousin Tiffany pointing at my dress and whispering to her friend that I looked like the help. There was my Aunt Sarah rolling her eyes when I tried to speak. I played every single moment of their cruelty back to them on a 40-foot screen. I forced them to watch themselves bullying a woman they thought was defenseless. The laughter in the room died instantly. The clinking of glasses stopped. The air turned freezing cold. I let the video play until the very end, where I walked out alone while they toasted to my departure. The screen went black. The lights came back up blindingly bright. I looked out at the sea of 150 faces. They looked terrified. They looked ashamed. But mostly they looked confused. They still did not understand that this was not a reconciliation. "I saw you," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I saw every single one of you. You drank my father's champagne, and you laughed while he tried to destroy me. You did not stand up for me. You did not walk out. You stayed. You applauded. And now you are here eating my food and drinking my wine, expecting a reward for your loyalty." I signaled to the waitstaff. A team of 20 servers marched out from the kitchen, but they were not carrying dessert trays. They were carrying silver platters stacked high with thick white envelopes. "You came here for a handout," I said, "and I am a woman of my word. I have prepared a personalized package for every single person in this room." The servers began distributing the envelopes. I watched the greed flicker back into their eyes. They thought maybe I was just lecturing them before giving them the money. They thought this was just a scolding before the payout. Hands reached out eagerly, snatching the envelopes from the silver platters. "Go ahead," I said. "Open them." The sound of ripping paper filled the room. 150 envelopes were torn open in unison. But there were no checks inside. There was no cash. Instead, there were legal documents. Thick, stapled court orders with red stamps on the front. A murmur of confusion started in the front row and spread like a wave to the back. "What is this?" Uncle Marcus shouted, holding up his papers. "This is a court summons." I leaned into the microphone. "That is correct, Uncle Marcus. That is a lawsuit for the $10,000 you borrowed from me 6 years ago for your business startup. You claimed you went bankrupt, but my auditors found you bought a boat 2 weeks later. I am suing you for the principal plus interest and legal fees." I looked at Aunt Sarah. Aunt Sarah, that is a cease and desist order regarding the lies you have been spreading about me at church. If you mention my name one more time in your prayer circle, I will sue you for defamation of character. I looked at the rest of the room. And for the rest of you, what you are holding is a permanent restraining order. It mandates that you stay 500 feet away from me, my home, and my place of business. It bans you from contacting me via phone, email, or social media. If you violate this order, you will be arrested for contempt of court. The room erupted. People were shouting, some were crying. They were waving the papers in the air, screaming that I could not do this to family. Family, I laughed, and the sound echoed off the walls. You are not family. You are parasites. You were happy to watch me bleed when you thought I was poor. The only reason you are here is because you smell money. Well, the bank is closed. I stepped out from behind the podium. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before the police arrive to enforce the trespassing laws. And do not bother taking the centerpieces. I have already itemized everything in the room, and if anything is missing, I will add it to your legal bill. I did not wait for them to leave. I turned my back on them just like they had turned their backs on me. I walked off the stage, my white suit glowing under the spotlight. Behind me, I heard the chaotic sounds of 150 greedy people realizing they had walked into a trap. They were scrambling for the exits, pushing each other out of the way, just as selfish in defeat as they were in victory. I walked through the kitchen and out the back door where Marcus was waiting with the car. I sat in the back seat and took a deep breath. I felt lighter. I had just surgically removed the cancer that had plagued my life for decades. I had not just burned the bridge, I had nuked it. And as we drove away from the hotel, leaving the chaos in the rearview mirror, I knew I would never have to fake a smile at a family reunion ever again. The roster was cleared. I was finally free. The collapse of the Wilson dynasty did not happen with a bang, but with the scratching of a cheap ballpoint pen on a plea deal agreement. Hunter Davis, the man who had sneered at me for driving a sedan, sat in a small gray interrogation room and sold his soul to save his skin. He did not look like a member of the elite anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. The district attorney had offered him a choice. He could go to prison for 10 years for grand theft auto and fraud, or he could testify against the mastermind behind the money laundering scheme. Hunter did not hesitate. He did not ask for time to think. He did not ask to call his wife. I watched the video deposition later. Hunter leaned into the microphone, his eyes darting around the room nervously. "It was Desmond," he said, his voice cracking. "My father-in-law. He set everything up. He told me the car was a gift. He told me the accounts were clean. I was just following orders. I am a victim here." He threw my father under the bus with the same ease he had thrown my keys to the valet. But his betrayal did not stop there. Hunter knew that a wife cannot be forced to testify against her husband, but a bitter ex-wife is a prosecutor's dream. So before the ink was even dry on his plea deal, he instructed his court-appointed lawyer to file for divorce. He cited irreconcilable differences and fraud, claiming Chloe had misled him about her financial status. He abandoned my sister not because he fell out of love, but because she was no longer a useful asset. He left her alone to face the public humiliation while he tried to crawl into a hole of witness protection. While Hunter was singing like a canary, my father was preparing for his Sunday sermon. Even with his accounts frozen and his house seized, Desmond Wilson still believed he was untouchable inside the walls of his church. He stood in the pulpit wearing his white ceremonial robes, looking out at the congregation. The pews were not as full as usual. The rumors had started to spread, but Desmond preached with a manic intensity, desperate to hold on to the last scrap of his power. "The devil is testing us," he shouted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Enemies are at the gate. They want to tear down what we have built. But we shall not be moved." He raised his hands to the ceiling, waiting for the chorus of amens. Instead, he heard the heavy thud of the sanctuary doors swinging open. The silence that fell over the church was absolute. Walking down the center aisle were not latecomers seeking salvation. It was a team of federal agents flanked by uniformed police officers. They did not run. They walked with the slow, deliberate pace of inevitable justice. Desmond stopped mid-sentence. His hands shook in the air. He looked at his deacons sitting in the front row, hoping they would stand up and defend him, hoping they would form a human wall. But the deacons looked at the floor, they looked at their Bibles. They looked anywhere but at him. They knew about the missing charity funds. They knew about the shell companies. They were not going to go down with the captain. The lead agent climbed the steps to the pulpit. He did not take the microphone. He simply took my father's wrist and turned him around. Desmond Wilson, you are under arrest for racketeering, tax evasion, and 30 counts of wire fraud. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent sanctuary, amplified by the sound system my father had paid for with stolen money. My father looked out at the congregation one last time. He saw faces recording him on their phones. He saw the choir members whispering. He saw the end of his legacy. He did not look like a prophet. He looked like a con man who had finally run out of tricks. As they led him away, still wearing his holy robes, he looked small. The man who had terrorized my childhood with his booming voice and his demands for perfection was dragged out the side door, his head hung low in defeat. And then there was my mother, Loretta Wilson, the woman who had ruled Buckhead society with an iron fist, the woman who believed that image was everything. She was not arrested, she was simply discarded. With the house sealed and the accounts drained, she had nowhere to go. Her friends, the women she had lunched with for 30 years, stopped returning her calls. The country club revoked her membership. The charity boards removed her name from their websites. She was toxic. I found out where she was staying through a notification from the private investigator I had hired to keep tabs on them. She was not at the Ritz. She was not even at a Holiday Inn. She was at a roadside motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour. I drove past it one evening just to see. The neon sign buzzed with a dying letter flickering on and off. I saw my mother walking out of the lobby. She was wearing one of her designer coats, but it was wrinkled and stained. She was carrying a small plastic bag from a convenience store. She walked to a pawn shop next door to the motel. I watched from across the street. She pulled a ring from her finger. It was her anniversary diamond. The ring she had flashed in my face 1,000 times to prove how much my father loved her. She argued with the man behind the counter. I could see her gesturing frantically. She was trying to use her old tactics, trying to demand respect, trying to negotiate based on the Wilson name. The pawnbroker just shook his head and pointed at the door. She slumped. All the fight left her body. She took the cash he offered. A wad of small bills that probably amounted to less than the cost of one of her facials. She shoved the money into her pocket and walked out into the cold night air. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking around as if waiting for a limousine to pull up. As if waiting for someone to realize a mistake had been made and whisk her back to her mansion. But no car came. No friends appeared. There was just the sound of highway traffic and the flickering neon light. She looked old. For the first time in my life, Loretta Wilson looked her age. The mask of perfection had cracked, and underneath was just a lonely, bitter woman who had sacrificed her children on the altar of her own vanity. She walked back to her motel room number 12 and closed the door. I did not feel happy seeing her like that. But I did not feel sad either. I felt a sense of completion. They had spent years trying to make me feel small. They had tried to make me feel worthless. And in the end, they had done it to themselves. Hunter was a rat in a cage. Desmond was a false prophet in chains. And Loretta was a queen without a kingdom. The tragedy wasn't that they lost their money. The tragedy was that without their money they realized they had absolutely nothing else. No love, no loyalty, no family. They were finally experiencing the isolation they had forced on me for 29 years. And unlike me, they did not have the strength to survive it. The elevator to the 45th floor of the Atlas Capitol building moves so smoothly you barely feel the ascent. It is a silent, pressurized ride to the top of the world. I sat behind my desk, made of imported Italian marble, staring at the closed double doors. My assistant Julian had buzzed me 2 minutes ago to tell me they were here. He asked if I wanted security present in the room. I told him no. I did not need muscle for this. This was not a physical confrontation. This was a closing argument. When the doors finally opened, my parents walked in. They looked like ghosts of the people I once knew. My father Desmond was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big for him, now that the stress of the indictment had caused him to lose 20 pounds. His shoulders were slumped. The man who used to fill a room with his booming voice now seemed to shrink under the recessed lighting of my office. My mother Loretta walked a step behind him. She was not wearing Chanel. She was wearing a simple department store dress, and her hair was pulled back in a severe gray bun. The fire was gone from her eyes, replaced by a dull, desperate hunger. They walked across the long expanse of the room, their shoes making no sound on the thick plush carpet. I did not stand up. I did not offer them a seat. I simply watched them approach, waiting for them to speak first. Amara, my father said, his voice raspy and weak. "Thank you for seeing us. We know you are busy." I said nothing. I just clasped my hands on the desk and waited. "We are staying in a motel on the interstate," my mother added, her voice trembling. "The police seized everything, Amara, even my wedding ring. We have nothing. We are eating from vending machines." She paused, waiting for me to react, waiting for the daughter she raised to kick in. When I remained silent, she tried a different tactic. She tried to weaponize the past. "I remember when you were born, Amara. You were so small. I held you in my arms and I promised God I would protect you. I know we have had our differences. I know we made mistakes, but we are your parents. You cannot let us live like this. It is a sin to dishonor your father and mother." My father nodded, grasping at the religious straw. "The Bible says forgiveness is divine, Amara. We are a family. Families fight, but they do not destroy each other." Hunter. That boy deceived us. He turned us against each other. But we see the truth now. You are the strong one. You are the one who held us together. I almost laughed. The revisionist history was breathtaking. They were blaming Hunter. They were blaming the devil. They were blaming everyone but themselves. They were standing in my office not because they loved me, but because they were cold and hungry, and I was their last resort. I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside sat a leather checkbook. I placed it on the cool marble surface. The sound of the heavy leather hitting the stone made them both jump. "You sent me a bill?" I said, my voice steady and calm. "On my birthday you stood on a stage and told the world that I owed you $527,000. You itemized my existence. You put a price tag on every meal, every dentist appointment, every moment of care you ever provided." My father flinched. That was just a lesson, Amara. We did not mean it literally." "I mean it literally," I interrupted. I pulled a gold fountain pen from the holder. I opened the checkbook. "I am a businesswoman, Desmond, and in business, when you receive an invoice, you pay it." I began to write. The scratching of the nib against the paper was loud in the silent room. I wrote the date. I wrote the name, Desmond and Loretta Wilson. And then I wrote the amount. 527000. I signed my name at the bottom with a flourish. I tore the check from the book. The ripping sound was sharp and violent, like a bandage being pulled off a wound. I slid the check across the desk. It stopped right at the edge, directly in front of them. $527,000, I said. "That is the exact amount you said I cost you. That is the reimbursement for my childhood." My parents looked at the check. Their eyes widened. That piece of paper was more money than they had seen in months. It was salvation. It was hot meals. It was a new apartment. It was dignity. "But there are conditions," I continued, leaning back in my chair. "This is not a gift. This is a transaction. This is a settlement agreement. If you pick up that check, you are agreeing to the terms." "What terms?" my mother asked, her eyes glued to the numbers. "The terms are simple," I said. "That money buys my freedom. It buys my severance from this family. If you take that check, you are acknowledging that the debt is paid in full. You will never contact me again. You will never speak my name. You will never come to my office or my home. You will take that money, leave Atlanta, and disappear." I looked them both in the eye. "Or," I said, lowering my voice, "you can leave the check on the table. We can walk out of here and get dinner. We can start therapy. We can try to be a real family starting from zero, with no money, but with the truth." It was the ultimate test. I was giving them a choice between the daughter they claimed to love and the money they claimed they didn't care about. I held my breath. A small, foolish part of me, the little girl who just wanted her mother to hug her, hoped they would tear the check up. I hoped they would say, "Amara, we do not want your money, we want you." My father looked at me. Then he looked at the check. He licked his lips. "We have a lot of legal fees, Amara," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "The lawyers want a retainer before they will help with the tax charges." My mother did not even make an excuse. She reached out her hand, trembling. Her fingers brushed the paper. She grabbed the check, clutching it to her chest like it was a holy relic. "We have to survive, Amara," she whispered. "You understand, don't you? We have to survive." They chose the money. They did not hesitate. They did not debate. They grabbed the cash and sold their daughter for the second time. The first time was for social status. This time was for survival. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. My heart had broken a long time ago. It was the last tether. The invisible cord that binds a child to their parents snapped. I was untethered. I was drifting, but I was free. "Get out," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. "Take your money and go." My father nodded quickly, tucking the check into his pocket, as if afraid I would change my mind. "You are a good girl, Amara," he said, a pathetic attempt at flattery. "God bless you." They turned and walked toward the door. They walked faster this time. They had what they came for. They did not look back. They did not wave. The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. As the metal doors slid shut, cutting them out of my life forever, I saw my mother pull the check out of my father's pocket to check the amount one more time. I sat alone in my office as the sun began to set over Atlanta, turning the sky a brilliant, bruised purple. I looked at the empty space on my desk where the check had been. I had just spent $500,000. To anyone else it would seem like a fortune. But as I swiveled my chair around to look out at the city lights, I knew the truth. I had bought my life back. I had purchased my own emancipation. And honestly, it was a bargain. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 29 years, I did not feel the weight of their expectations. I felt only the cool, quiet silence of peace. The sun sets differently when you are standing on top of the world. From the terrace of the Atlas Capitol building, 45 stories up, the cars on the highway look like toys, and the people look like ants. I stood at the railing, feeling the wind whip against my face. It was a cold wind, but it felt clean. It felt like a baptism. Somewhere down there in the maze of traffic and noise, my parents were driving away. They had their check. They had their $527,000. They had the price of my childhood in their pocket. But as I looked out at the horizon where the purple sky met the city lights, I realized they had left the most valuable thing behind. They had left me. I turned away from the edge and walked back toward the glass doors. Inside the conference room, the lights were warm. My team was waiting. There was Julian, my assistant, who had stayed up with me for 3 nights straight building the case. There was Marcus, my head of security, who had stood between me and my mother's rage without flinching. There was Sarah, my mentor, who had taught me that being a Black woman in finance was a superpower, not a liability. They were not related to me by blood. They did not share my DNA. But as I walked into the room and Julian popped a bottle of vintage champagne, I saw genuine smiles. I saw respect. I saw love. "To Amara," Julian said, raising his glass. "To the toughest boss and the best friend I know." We clinked glasses. The sound was bright and clear. It sounded nothing like the hollow laughter at my birthday party. This was my family. This was the family I had chosen. The family earned through loyalty and shared battles not through obligation and guilt. As we celebrated, I allowed myself a moment to think about the people who used to hold that title. I wondered if the money would keep them warm at night. I heard through the grapevine that my sister Chloe finally got a job. She is working at a diner in Decatur. She wears a polyester uniform now. No more designer gowns, no more ring lights. When customers recognize her from her viral humiliation, she has to swallow her pride and refill their coffee. She is learning for the first time in her life that respect is something you earn, not something you are owed. Hunter is currently serving year 1 of a 7-year sentence in a medium-security federal prison. He spends his days in a 6x8 cell, staring at cinder-block walls. He has plenty of time to think about the cars he drove and the people he stepped on. I heard he sends letters to Chloe begging for forgiveness, but she never answers. They destroyed each other just as efficiently as they tried to destroy me. And my parents. Desmond and Loretta, they have their money. They rented a small condo in a retirement community 2 towns over. They tried to join the social clubs. They tried to flash their cash to buy their way back into society. But word travels fast in Atlanta. The video of them burning my photo is still circulating. The story of the pastor who itemized his daughter has become a cautionary tale. They sit in their condo alone. When they walk into a restaurant, the room goes quiet. When they try to attend a new church, people get up and move to different pews. They have $500,000 in the bank, but they are the poorest people I know. They are bankrupt of love. They are destitute of connection. They have the check, but they lost the asset. I took a sip of champagne and felt the bubbles fizz on my tongue. The bitterness was gone. The anger that had fueled me for so long had evaporated, leaving behind a core of solid steel. For 29 years, I let them define my worth. I let them tell me I was a liability. I let them treat me like a bad investment. I let them convince me that I had to pay for the space I occupied in this world. But standing here tonight, looking at the faces of the people who truly see me, I know the truth. My worth is not on a spreadsheet. My value is not calculated in an invoice. I am not a sum of expenses. I am the architect of my own life. I built this empire from the bricks they threw at me. I turned their rejection into my fuel. I walked over to the window one last time and placed my hand against the glass. I looked at my reflection. I did not see the scared girl in the beige dress anymore. I saw a woman who had walked through the fire and came out refined like gold. If you are listening to this story and you feel like you are the black sheep, if you feel like you are being itemized and undervalued by the people who are supposed to protect you, I want you to know something. You do not owe them anything. You do not owe them your pain. You do not owe them your success. And you certainly do not owe them your future. You have the power to write your own invoice. You have the power to close the account. And you have the power to walk away and build a life so rich, so full, and so beautiful that their rejection becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. My name is Amara Wilson. I was the itemized daughter, but now I am just Amara, and I am priceless. Thank you for watching my story. If you have ever had to choose yourself over a toxic family, let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of walking away. Remember, your story is your own. Do not let anyone else hold the pen.